I've heard you say this is the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, I'm sure it's the tip. I mean, all the things, I spent 4 years researching this book, but I mean, even so, it's only the testimony of the people I found, and I only had 300 people out of 3,000 people that I identified and approached. And we have clearly some legal depositions, we have some cuts. But
there's a moment that happens in every scandal when silence stops being protection and starts becoming evidence. For Prince Andrew, that moment might have just arrived. Just days ago, something unusual happened. Andrew and Sarah Ferguson made their first public appearance together since losing every remaining royal title and honor they once held. It was supposed to be quiet, almost invisible. A granddaughter's christening. Family only. Low profile. But here's what caught everyone's attention. While other relatives went to the pub afterward for drinks in celebration, Andrew and Sarah didn't join them. They left early, separately, quietly. Now, you might think that's nothing. Family events get complicated, people have their reasons. But when you're trying to rebuild a shattered reputation, every single move gets analyzed. And this one raised more questions than it answered. Because at the exact moment, the palace is desperately trying to present Andrew as reformed, dignified, and moving forward, a fresh wave of allegations about what he was really like behind closed doors has started circulating again. And these aren't vague rumors. These are detailed accounts from people who worked for him, people who saw things firsthand. Stories about shouting matches, bizarre punishment rituals, staff members breaking down in tears, and demands so strange that even veteran royal aides were left speechless. The thing is, this isn't random. This isn't old news being recycled for clicks. Something has shifted. The palace can't control the narrative anymore, and that recent christening appearance has done the opposite of what it was meant to do. Instead of showing normalcy, it's reignited scrutiny. Because when a disgraced royal who's been stripped of everything suddenly reappears, people don't just move on. They look closer, they dig deeper, and they start asking the questions that never got proper answers. So where is all of this coming from? A huge part of the renewed attention traces back to a book that came out recently, The Rise and Fall of the House of York by Andrew Loney. Even weeks after publication, it hasn't left the conversation, and there's a reason for that. The allegations inside aren't just salacious gossip. They're backed up by former staff members who were actually there, who witnessed Andrew's behavior day after day, year after year. According to Loney, Andrew was obsessed with hierarchy, not just aware of it, obsessed. And staff members say he demanded to be bowed to every single time he entered a room. And if someone didn't do it correctly, or hesitated, or forgot, he wouldn't let it slide. He'd reportedly stop, look at them and say, "Let's try that again." Then he'd walk back out of the room and re-enter just so the person could bow to him properly the second time. Now, you might think that sounds absurd, maybe even funny, but according to people who were there, it wasn't playful. It wasn't a joke. It was about control. It was about making sure everyone around him understood exactly where they stood in the pecking order, and that was just the beginning. Loney's book also describes Andrew's explosive temper when things weren't done exactly the way he expected. There are claims that during arguments with Sarah Ferguson, his ex-wife, Andrew became so furious that people around them had to physically restrain him. These weren't minor disagreements. These were full-blown confrontations that left staff shaken. But here's where it gets even harder to dismiss. Some of the allegations aren't about temper or control. They're just strange. One aide was allegedly removed from his position because Andrew didn't like the appearance of a mole on his face. Another staff member was dismissed for wearing a nylon tie instead of silk. Think about that for a second. These weren't performance issues. These weren't about competence or professionalism. These were personal judgments based entirely on appearance. Then there are the daily rituals that former staff describe as humiliating. Andrew allegedly insisted that maids climb 4 flights of stairs every single morning just to open his bedroom curtains. Not because he couldn't do it himself. He was perfectly capable. It wasn't about need. It was about being served. It was about reinforcing that hierarchy every single day. And then there are the incidents that sound almost too bizarre to believe. A television technician reportedly called to the palace late at night because Andrew couldn't figure out how to use his TV remote. to use his TV remote. Police protection officers, highly trained professionals paid for by taxpayers, allegedly sent to collect Andrew's used golf balls on the course, or worse, tasked with finding women for him. Let that sink in. These weren't personal assistants hired for odd jobs. These were security officers. Their job was protection, not fetching golf balls or playing matchmaker. But according to these accounts, that's exactly what they were asked to do. Now here's what makes all of this especially uncomfortable. When allegations surfaced years ago about Meghan Markle's treatment of staff, Buckingham Palace launched a formal investigation almost immediately. They took it seriously. They looked into it. But at the same time, according to Loney, insiders say the palace was quietly bracing itself for historic complaints about Andrew. There was genuine concern that long-buried allegations of bullying, profanity-laced tirades, and mistreatment would come flooding out. They never did, at least not officially. And that difference in how these situations were handled continues to raise serious questions. Why investigate one and not the other? What's the criteria? Who decides? Today, Andrew's position has deteriorated even further. He's no longer using any royal titles. He has no official role whatsoever, and sources close to the situation say King Charles has run out of patience. The monarchy is already under enough pressure. Public trust is fragile. The last thing anyone needs is a disgraced brother generating fresh headlines every few weeks. And yet, that christening appearance made something very clear. Andrew hasn't disappeared. He's still there, still present in family events, still capable of pulling focus away from the institution at exactly the wrong moment. Behind the scenes, the emotional toll seems to be hitting Sarah Ferguson the hardest. Royal commentator Phil Dampier has said that friends are genuinely worried about her mental health. He's claimed she's close to breaking down, overwhelmed by the relentless scrutiny and the fact that her daughters keep getting dragged back into controversy. What's striking is that Andrew and Sarah apparently believe they're being punished over and over again for the same mistakes. The titles are gone, the reputation is destroyed, and still, the stories keep coming. But from the palace's perspective, this isn't about punishment. It's about damage control. It's about containment. Because every time Andrew appears in public, every time a new allegation surfaces, it threatens to undo years of carefully managed image rehabilitation. As the year winds down, there's almost no appetite for more scandal. Christmas is around the corner. The public is watching closely. And every fresh story, every resurfaced allegation lands harder than the one before it. But here's the part that makes this moment different from all the previous controversies. In recent weeks, previously unseen photographs linked to Jeffrey Epstein have resurfaced and started circulating again. These aren't new images, but their reappearance now in this context has reignited public anger in a way that's hard to ignore. The photos show Andrew in Epstein's world. Relaxed, familiar, comfortable in private settings that, given everything we know now, many people find deeply unsettling. Andrew has consistently denied any wrongdoing. He's been clear about that. But the images have had an impact anyway, because they reinforce something the public already believes they're seeing. A pattern. For many people watching this unfold, these photos don't stand alone. They sit alongside years of allegations from former staff, allegations about a man who, according to people who worked for him, exercised rigid control, demanded absolute obedience, and punished anyone beneath him who stepped out of line. And now, there he is in those photos, appearing entirely at ease in environments where power and entitlement went completely unchecked. Commentators have pointed out that the images don't introduce brand new allegations on their own, but they do something arguably more powerful. They give a face to the broader questions people have been asking for years. Questions about judgment, about entitlement, about the company he chose to keep. Several analysts have noted that images often carry more weight than words, especially when they appear to confirm what people have already been told. When former staff describe someone who believed he was above the rules, and then the public sees photos of that same person in spaces where rules clearly didn't apply, it creates a narrative that's very hard to shake. There's also been a noticeable shift in how these images are being discussed in the press. They're no longer being treated as historical artifacts from a closed chapter. Instead, they're increasingly framed as part of an ongoing, unresolved pattern. Legal experts and royal commentators alike have stressed that while Andrew denies all allegations, the repeated resurfacing of these photos keeps the controversy alive because they collide so directly with recent accounts of his private behavior. In short, the public isn't separating the man in those photographs from the man described by former staff anymore. In many minds, they've become the same person. So when you step back and look at everything together, the real question isn't about public appearances or titles or formal roles. It's about behavior. It's about how power was used in private. It's about how staff say they were treated. And it's about why those accounts are resurfacing right now, at this specific moment, alongside images that so many people find impossible to ignore. Do these stories finally force a real reckoning, or will they fade into the background again, like they have so many times before? That's the question hanging over everything right now. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to stay updated on the latest royal stories and developments, make sure you subscribe.